Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. It's John and Jenna with Flippin' Ain't Easy. And today I have a special guest that I've been really looking forward to bringing on the show ever since we did the Profit Playbook podcast a couple Saturdays ago. This gentleman has been really just a wealth of information. And he was kind enough to get up very late or stay up very late with us. He's in the UK. And come and talk eBay and maybe answer any questions that you might have. So I want to bring on, he goes by Robert, but his channel is Ebert eBay Tips and Tricks. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's only a couple of months old. Well, I mean, the account's been going for a while, but I've only been posting videos for a couple of months. So yeah, that's the channel. And Bert Bassett is, if you're in the UK, you'll understand, because Bert Bassett is the mascot of a candy company, and so me being Robert Bassett, that's why everybody calls me Bert.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. You used to work with eBay in UK, and give us a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, I joined eBay 16 years ago to set up and run their advertising business in the UK. And then after doing that for a few years, I moved across and I was director of hard goods. So I didn't do fashion and soft furnishings, but I did everything else, running all the merchants in that. And then I became business development director, and I was responsible for all the small businesses that operate on eBay. And that actually probably puts me in the same kind of category as your viewers and followers, because there are stronger distinctions between business and non-business sellers in the UK, which I don't think exist. It's a bit more blurry in the States. So you guys are trying to earn a living doing it, and those are the kind of people that I used to look after. In the UK, there's about 200,000 active business sellers on the platform, and only a very small fraction of those are what you call traditional, very large style retailers. Most of the business sellers on eBay are, under the $100,000 mark a year, and often quite substantially under that.
Oh, okay. Well, the topic at hand that I wanted to talk with you about, and it really, if there's any takeaway that I was able to get from the episode, the Profit Playbook podcast, was how you had mentioned, and I guess I'll be the first to admit that maybe my thought process was wrong on this. And you kind of debunked that, in that, you want to tick off all these boxes to get yourself ahead of your competition. And you kind of said that's nice to do, but what eBay is really concerned about is your conversion rate. And wanted to kind of get more of your thoughts on that. Maybe kind of add to what you were saying in the podcast.
Absolutely. And I've checked out a few comments that have been made subsequently, and it's probably worth clarifying some stuff. So when I talk about conversion rate, what I'm talking about is how many times someone has to see your item before they buy it. So there's a lot of people who've been making comments, and they've been confusing it a little bit with sell-through rate. How long does it take me to sell an item? That's not really what conversion rate is about, because actually, if you have quite a rare or unique item, then it just doesn't get a lot of views. If you have something that's quite niche, then you may only get 50 people looking at it in the space of 3 months or something like that. But what's important is when they look at it, that they buy it. And that's the important thing. And likewise, you can have something which sells quite frequently, but it sells quite frequently because there are millions of views for it. It's a very common item, and it can have quite a low conversion rate. So it's not about sell-through rate. It's not about how quickly it sells. It's about how likely it is to sell when someone actually looks at it. So that's the first important thing there. Is it's not necessarily about the speed you sell. It's about the efficiency with which you convert the impressions that you actually get. The second thing to really think about it is it's fairly obvious that that's going to be the metric that eBay look for, because ultimately the problem they have is they have buyers coming to the site, and they have to come up with a system, an algorithm, and rules which are likely to put things in front of those buyers that they're going to buy. And it's not going to take them many clicks to find them, and it's not going to take them, they're not going to have to kiss a lot of frogs in order to find their prince, so to speak.
Right.
And so therefore, what they're really looking for is when they're choosing which item they're going to put in front of someone, obviously they have to do the basic identification. You know, if you're looking for a pair of jeans, they have to be relatively certain that what they're putting in front of you is a pair of jeans.
Right.
But you do any search on eBay, there's hundreds of thousands of all of those things. So then the important thing becomes, what order do you put them in? And if you're going to calculate what order you're going to put something in, the two things you're looking at is, if I show a buyer this item based on what they've searched, how likely is it they're going to click on it? And then if they've clicked on it, how likely is it that they're going to buy? And so those percentages are really important, because those determine how much money eBay is going to make, because they determine how likely people are to buy something. So a really good example of this from a conversion point of view, I'm going to try and answer a bit more quickly than I did on the PPP. But back in the day, sellers of iPhones used to complain because the algorithm, when you typed in iPhone, would just put up loads of cases and accessories. And they would say, people are typing the word iPhone in, but you're showing them cases. And so my iPhone doesn't appear. But actually, the reason that was happening is because actually the most common thing that people purchased when they typed in the word iPhone on eBay was in fact a case. And so if they typed in iPhone and you showed them a load of iPhones in search, then they would then move on. You know, they'd click through the pages, they'd try and find other things until they got to what they actually wanted, which was the case. And so they try as much as possible to make it so that that first page of search has got all the stuff that the buyer actually wants to buy. And that's because those things convert better for them. So that's what we really mean by conversion. And it's quite important, because if you can do the things that make it so that when people click on your item, they're more likely to purchase, then not only does that mean you're making more money, but you're also going to rank better in search, which means you appear more frequently, which means you're going to do well. Now, then it comes to the other point, which is, if you're selling 7 t-shirts that are all the same, then that's quite an important thing to you to demonstrate by selling t-shirts with a high conversion rate, that they should put those t-shirts up in search. Obviously, it's slightly different when you're selling individual items, because, you know, once it's sold, there isn't a conversion score there anymore. You don't have that item. And so at that stage, what eBay's doing is it's assigning a value to what it thinks your conversion is going to be. And what that means is, when you first list an item, it's probably going to give you a bigger chance. It's going to sit there at eBay. It's going to sit there and say, right, here's this item. We don't have a lot of data about it. For all we know, it might be the most clickable, most convertible item we've ever seen. So we're going to give it a boost when it launches. We're going to put it in front of people so we can see what happens when people click on it. But what that also means is, because you don't have a history necessarily of selling that specific item, the longer it then, have to be careful here, not the longer, the more impressions it gets and the more clicks it gets without selling. So then it drifts downwards in search. And that's how you explain how your items are really lively and you see them up in search when you first put them onto the platform. But then if you leave them on the platform for a long period of time, you know, if eBay's shown your listing 100 times in search and no one's clicked on it, then it knows you can't have a click-through rate of 1%, because someone would have clicked on it by then. And so you can see you're kind of proving over time that you don't have a high click-through rate. And then by the time that it's been shown to people 100 times, the page has been shown. So enough people have clicked on it. So you've got 100 page views and no one's bought it. eBay also then knows that your conversion rate isn't going to be more than 1%. But it does know that there are items that they could put in front of the buyers that do have a higher conversion rate. So I sell cat toys, and I'm one of those people who has depth of stock. So imagine you're flipping and you come across a cat tree or something like that. I wouldn't advise you to sell cat trees. It's a bad business to be in.
Sell the cat litter boxes. We get those all the time. The automatic ones.
If you get something that's a one-off and you're selling it, then you're competing against me, and I've sold 16,000 of my cat toy, and my conversion rate is 10%. So you're only really going to get a short shot to be ahead of me in search, because by the time you've had 1,000 impressions, eBay is going to know that you're not converting as high as my listing does, and so my listing drifts upwards. So that's one of the challenges you have as a flipper or a reseller. If you sell t-shirts, type in the word t-shirt on eBay, and it's Fruit of the Loom or an equivalent brand, and it's 5 packs of them for $20 or something like that. And every now and again you'll see a Zeppelin t-shirt or a Scooby-Doo t-shirt or something like that in there, but they only get a brief moment in the sun. It's not a reason to get terribly depressed, because obviously if someone's searching for a Scooby-Doo t-shirt, then there's going to be a smaller set, and it's likely if someone actually types in Scooby-Doo t-shirt, they're not going to want the Fruit of the Loom, they're going to want yours. And so that Fruit of the Loom that converts so well for people who don't care what t-shirt they have is actually going to start converting really poorly. You put a plain t-shirt in front of someone who really wants Scooby-Doo, then the impressions will be there, but people won't even click on it because that's not what they want. So that means the Fruit of the Loom t-shirt indexes really well for t-shirt, but it indexes really poorly for Scooby-Doo t-shirt. And that's because of the relative conversion levels. And so that's actually why, we're getting into you could potentially just talk for hours just about this, but it's that classic thing of choosing the keywords in your title, for instance. So who are you competing with, and what keywords do you feel as though you have the right to win? And so if you have a Scooby-Doo t-shirt, now you could put keywords in there where you're going to bat against the Fruit of the Loom guys. You could talk about it being 100% cotton. You could talk about like general t-shirty things in your title, because you think that's what that's what the normal t-shirt buyer is typing in. But actually what you might find is that more specifically Scooby-Doo keywords would actually do a better job for you, because they're going to catch the long tail searches. And like I can use another example within cat toys. Some of my cat toys, I could just put the names of some other animals on there. Like some of my cat toys, probably a dog could play with, or a rabbit could play with, or something like that. And so I could use up some of my keywords, putting rabbit and, dog, small dog, or something like that on my toys. Or I could use, in the UK, it's a bit different, but like indoor and outdoor cats, most cats in the US are sort of indoor cats, but in where we are, they're all over the place. So actually, if I put indoor as a keyword, that's really useful, because it's definitely something that a cat owner would be searching for. So it's that question of, do I double down on my focus group, or do I broaden my search? Now, if I broaden my search, my item is far more likely to appear in front of people who aren't particularly interested in it. So I'm going to get those impressions, but I'm going to get a lot of those impressions where no one's clicking on it. And so is it really doing me any good? Would it be actually better for me to have less impressions, but be more engaging to the group that's most likely to purchase? And so when we talk about conversion, it's informing all the choices we make, because that's just an example of what you do with your title. But almost every decision you make with how you promote your items, all of those kind of things, you can take either a broad view or you can take a focused view. And I think the focused view for people who are flipping and reselling is probably better than the broad view. And again, it's going to affect things like, promoted listings as a choice. Are you going to put a lot of effort into putting a ton of impressions out there, which is going to put your item in front of a whole load more people. But are those people going to be as likely to be your customers as someone more specific? And is there a better use of your time and money than doing those things? Potentially what you might want to do is say, I don't want to do promoted listings general. I actually want to pick some absolutely laser focused keywords that I absolutely want to win on, that are very specific to the items I have. So it's like, I don't want to be first page for t-shirt, which is what promoted listings general will do for me. I want to be number one for Scooby-Doo t-shirt. So maybe that's the keyword that I'll bid on. I'll have a smaller, more perfectly formed campaign. So it kind of affects all your choices. And I talk about that, but also I'm very keen to talk to people about knowing how to look at the reports so they can test things, so that when they're actually doing things, they don't do it because they have a feeling that's a good idea. They do it because they can see in the numbers that it's actually working for them. But so yeah, conversion is really important because it fundamentally drives directly the revenue you have. You know, a better converting listing is going to, you know, it's going to sell more easily. It's likely to have more people wanting it, which means you could probably charge a higher price for it. But also it's going to have that secondary effect of the fact that it boosts search. Now, I think it boosts search directly if you have more than one of the item. But it's also my opinion, and it genuinely is just an opinion, because I don't know how I'd go about proving it. But I think that if you're eBay and you're trying to assign a conversion value to an item and you're not sure, so I don't know, I'm repeating the word Scooby-Doo way too often in this thing. But if we take that Scooby-Doo t-shirt and you are eBay and you're trying to mathematically ascribe a value to that, you're trying to guess, if someone lists a Scooby-Doo t-shirt, what percentage do we put against it? Because that's what we know. And I think, first of all, what you would think of is, if you're eBay, you would say, is this an item I can identify which has been sold by someone on the platform before, and how did it do then? So is it like a well-known Scooby-Doo t-shirt with identifiers that mean that eBay could have it in a catalog and know what it was? Mm-hmm. But I think with a lot of the stuff that flippers and resellers sell, you can't easily have that information, because, you know, they don't often have barcode information or MPNs or things like that on there. So then I think it probably is a factor that I'm looking at, what are the bona fides of this particular seller? When this seller lists something, what typically are their conversion rates? What are their conversion rates right now? Because it would just seem logical to me that that would be the kind of way I would assign a number rather than randomly. So so I think there is an element of success breeds success. And like, I put out a video the other day where I said, like, this might explain a couple of things that people who do this flipping kind of selling on eBay have said, which is that things go quiet for a long period of time, and then they sell something, and then they sell a lot of things, which seems to be a common phenomenon, that good things lead to good things, and then there's quiet periods, and so on and so forth. And maybe that's it. You know, if you have a burst of sales, then eBay suddenly says, well, this seller is doing something right. Let's tweak that number for them a little bit and get things going. I think the second phenomenon is I've been really skeptical about this, because I couldn't really see the logic of it, which is the idea that you have to list regularly. And if you don't list regularly, then things go dead. And I'm sitting there with my, 5 years ago when I was there at eBay, and me thinking, why the hell would I care about that? You know, an item is an item is an item. You know, why would I do anything about that consciously? But what I started to think is that you've got a system where we know that when you list something new, it gets featured a bit more heavily. It gets more impressions. And I think everybody recognizes that when you do a new listing, it gets loads of impressions. there's also and this is a bit of a boring kind of maths point, is that if you look at the point at which you list an item, and then you look at the point when it's going to sell after a certain amount of impressions, that's a curve which only kind of goes downwards. So sales are usually concentrated nearer to when you list an item than further away. I don't know why I'm waving my hands, because you can't see them, but I am waving my hands in that way.
Yeah.
So it's almost that if you're listing something new, then that's the time at which you find out it was going to be something that converted really well. And so actually new items, if you're any new item is going to kind of intrinsically and mathematically boost your general conversion rate, because they're new. And so actually there is a kind of logic which says, if I'm just having this drumbeat of new items, what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I'm going to have some high converting items on at all times. Whereas if I listed all of my items in January, then by the time I get to August, my entire inventory is going to be things that haven't sold for 8 months, which are going to have low conversion. So that's just that is, I did the video and I put a tinfoil hat on, because I said I don't really have proof of it, but it kind of makes logical sense. But anyway,
well,
I'm actually looking in the chat and people are saying, "Oh God, here we go again. He's spoken."
Well,
a short question.
You left eBay around 2019, and you had mentioned 2020. So you had mentioned that you had spent some time sitting next to the folks that were working on the search engines, right? In the search. Yep. And I'm wondering, since you've left eBay until now I know eBay has implemented a lot of the changes behind the scenes with AI and all that, but how big of a difference is it now as compared to when you were working with eBay as pertaining to search? And the second part of that question is, why is it that we see irrelevant search results when we're asking for a specific thing? Like I'll type in, a brand, a model number, and what it is, and they'll give me maybe stuff that's related to it, but not quite what I'm asking for.
Yeah, it's it all comes down to numbers in the end. So they'll put an algorithm in place, and as with all algorithms, there's like unintended consequences. So you write a number and you set up some rules and you expect people to behave in a certain way and certain things to happen. It doesn't always work that way. But over the long run, what happens is everything plays out. So theoretically, the most stuff gets sold. And it seems like a really glib answer, but the reason you're seeing what you think are irrelevant results when you do a search is because actually over time the data is showing that that stuff does sell when those keywords are typed in. And it's sometimes people are searching for things, and it might be a really big purchase that they're thinking about making, that they're going to spend 2 months making the decision, and you show them something adjacent or cheaper or different, and that's a quicker decision for them to make. And the data just comes out over time. Is if they took a literal interpretation and said, we're only going to show exactly the thing that the person has typed in, they will always be looking at what happens if they don't do that, and which creates the most GMV and the most conversion in the long run. And it's to your benefit. I think people always think about the downside of this, but there's also an upside to it, because when I'm determined to just keep mentioning it, but sometimes when someone's just typing t-shirt and looking for a Fruit of the Loom, Scooby-Doo comes up and they buy that because they go, ooh. And so it works in both directions a little bit, is that you just uniformly giving people exactly the same results and exactly what they've searched for doesn't allow you to really test what would be better and not better. And then over time, what hopefully happens is the algorithm settles down and says, this is the kind of mix of products that people want. And actually, what you've also got to remember is two types of searches, really. Like, what you've got to remember is you may be typing in something very specific because you're an expert in the item and you know exactly what you want, in which case you might be prepared to use more filters and make more searches. So for you, getting a mixed bag of results doesn't really hurt you too much, because you'll just make another search because you're a committed buyer. But if you're a casual buyer, then you need to maybe get one search and see something you want on that first page. So like they offer the broad choices because it satisfies the casuals, but it doesn't put off the really committed buyers, if you get my drift. But ultimately, it's about the numbers. Like, over time, then they won't keep showing the wrong results to people because they'll see that it's making them less money. And if it's making them less money, then they'll want to change it into something that makes them more money.
But it's almost like the seller is penalized for using broad keywords, right, to get their items into more searches. But at the same time, eBay is promoting that very behavior by including broader range of items within a. I
think it's what it is this is one where it's kind of spectator's bias. Because you're concentrating and you're checking, you're seeing all the downside of this, but you're not there constantly seeing all the upside where your items are appearing in places and people are buying them for the other reasons. It's like, because you're a pro and you're looking for your own stuff and everything like that, you won't see it working in the other direction. It's like there will be some situations in which you win and someone else loses, but then there will be other situations in which they lose and you win. And there's probably someone sat in another house in a different part of America cursing a different search result because your stuff is appearing there, and they don't think that's fair either. But the thing that's going to be in common with both of those angry people sitting in their houses in different parts of America is that the pages that are being shown, they're constantly being optimized to make the buyer spend more money. And because eBay is not in the business of trying, they may fail, don't get me wrong, but they are ultimately always attempting to get the highest yield off a search page, to put the items in front of a buyer which are going to make them the most money. Now, the good thing about that is they don't make any money unless you make money. So like, whatever even though their motivation is to take more final value fees, the great beauty of that is if they earn final value fees, that means that something has to have sold. And so, you're not in an adversarial relationship with them. Like, you may well criticize the methods, but I can absolutely tell you they are trying to maximize GMV. Well, they're not. They're trying to maximize final value fee, but that's going to be, in theory, good news for you. And I had a conversation with someone who left a few compelling comments on one of my videos saying that, they'd had a sudden unexpected drop in trade, and they thought it corresponded to a change in the search engine or how the AI worked. And I said, it's unfortunate that you can be right, but eBay not wrong at the same time. So again, let's move on from Scooby-Doo and T-shirts or something like that. I don't know. You sell you sell vintage NFL jerseys, and one day eBay's research and the algorithm starts saying to it, like, what our users are kind of doing when they come onto the page is they're buying new jerseys, they're buying this season's stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to tweak the algorithm so that new in season does better. Let's say that's a random thing. And we're doing that because we know the numbers tell us that does better. Now, what then happens is you're analyzing the category if you're a category manager, and people buy more stuff. And that's a win because more stuff is being sold. But it sucks to be you if you're the guy or the woman who sells the vintage ones, because someone else is winning and you're losing, but the overall category is net bigger as a result. And in theory, that's a good result, because if more stuff is being sold, then sellers are making more money. But obviously in that situation, there are individual victims. But you've got to expect eBay to try and put a page in front of the buyer which gives them the things that they want to buy. And because if you don't satisfy the buyer, then they just go away completely. And then there's, again, it's quite hard to solve it, because the only solution to that is to kind of say to the vintage people, well, people don't want your stuff quite as much as you imagined. And what was happening is you were getting favorable results. Things were slightly biased in your favor when they shouldn't have been. I'm not saying this is true, by the way. That I definitely have no insight into the search engine as it pertains to NFL jerseys. So but you can see how the maths of it would work, is that if I'm eBay, I'm saying we have tweaked a search page and we've put the products in front of people that they actually want to buy. GMV has risen in this category, which means that sellers are making more money than they were before. But within that, some sellers have lost and other sellers have won. And that's an interesting point to get into about, what's your responsibility to the existing seller community, all of these kind of things. But it's perfectly understandable. And ultimately, it's supposed to be about the buyers. It's supposed to be about a shop where people come to buy things. So, yeah.
Well, as a seller, I'm trying to take all this information, right, and to bring it home as a reseller. And we're talking about how conversion rate, you want to, if you're broadening your keywords in your title, you're not, that's not helping. But at the same time, eBay is promoting the idea to broaden your keywords so that you get your items out in front of someone who's looking for that, Scooby-Doo t-shirt, but may just buy your generic t-shirt because, to use that example. So what's the takeaway? What's the best practice for sellers to take advantage of how search is currently set up when setting up, say, something as simple as their title?
Yeah, I mean, you do the things that you can do. So when you're searching, when you're setting up your keywords, right, the way you randomly get into a generic search for your category is to be a high converting item within your category. So if you think about what you can do, is you try and be the best Scooby-Doo that you can be, rather than necessarily trying to fight with the fruit of the loom people. And this is where all of the smaller actions that you can do are going to make a difference, because when you're facing up against some big old algorithm and high theory and maths and everything like that, you can tie yourself up in knots doing the system. But there are certain definitive things you can absolutely do that are going to help your click-through and conversion rate. And it's things along the lines of making it so that if you do all your images and you make a real effort to put a whole load of quality images on your product, so that, and I think the way it is you've just got to think of a circumstance where a customer is actually there and believe in it. So I genuinely believe that there are some people who are looking at items that decide not to buy them because they're not sure about something that matters to them. And sometimes it's, how is this item of clothing fastened? How many buttons does it have? What's it actually made of? What does the back of it look like? Are there any marks on the sleeve? That kind of stuff. And so every time you put an extra couple of images on or spend a bit more time explaining something, then what you're thinking about is that buyer who was on the edge, and you've tipped them from being someone who didn't buy into someone who did. Every time you do a seller newsletter to the people who've previously bought from you, a shop newsletter, you're taking someone who might not have purchased from you and you're giving yourself a chance that they will. And shop newsletters, for instance, are a really great new innovation that are there, because you can create buyer groups and you can do a shop newsletter And then suddenly people who purchased from you before, again, nudges to purchase again. And like, if we think about it from a maths point of view, think of the value of, you send a newsletter to someone, they see an item, they click on the item and they buy the item. That is that's like no search impressions, one page view, one sale. What does that do to the maths of an item that has previously not had much attention? It really works. Like, also, if you do the shop newsletter, for instance, and they click all the way through, then they're not looking at search pages and they're not looking at other item pages. They're going directly through to the item. So that means you're not triggering any attribution for promoted listings. So for instance, if you sit there and you normally run 10% promoted listings, then a newsletter, you could put a 10% coupon in every newsletter, because those purchasers are going to come on and purchase directly from you without triggering your promoted listings. So you were going to give them 10% anyway if they searched, but this way you can push them through. So actually, with the newsletters, you can do quite a lot, because you've by using promoted listings and saying, I was prepared to give someone 10% in order to do things. If you send offers to buyers, it's exactly the same. It's a spear phishing exercise. Is that you can improve your conversion. You can get more page views by just knocking 5% off in a send offer. It's much more targeted than potentially spending a bit of money to make a load of people who aren't very interested in your item come back and have a look at it. So there are plenty of tools you can do. There's the way you communicate with your customers. So one of the things you'll find is that a very small quantity of your customers are incredibly useful to you. It is that you don't just want people who like buying from you. You want people who love you so much that they'll recommend people to you. And you will have customers like that. They'll say, I bought something for my sister. And in my case, I bought something for my sister's cat, and so on. And now I'm telling all my friends. And I'm not quite a Pez dispenser level, but my origin story in the cat toys was I saw that a cat charity, a cat shelter, had purchased one of my toys, and it obviously was a cat charity address. And so I just sent them a box of cat toys instead of the one. And said, and also, if you want, I'll donate the £6 to your cat charity. They absolutely loved this. They put it on the front page of their little, I don't want to say crappy, but I will say crappy website. And then suddenly every mad cat lady in about a 30-mile radius of this particular charity all went online and bought one of my cat toys on a Sunday night. Now, what happened is I'd been selling about one cat toy a day. And then I sold 25 in one day. Now, if you sell 25 cat toys in about a 2-hour period, eBay thinks we've got a hot one here. And it moved me up onto the first page of search when I was previously like second, third page of search. And once you're on first page of search, people are just clicking on it because you're on the first page of search. And it was a step change. I went from doing one a day to doing, 5 to 10 a day. And from that, I built the whole platform. Now, you guys sell a lot of individual stuff, but if you can really show the love to customers and build up that extra thing, then they will start telling their friends. They'll be pointing people that like there are some super high value customers, and you can't underestimate how useful those people are, because they're also high conversion customers. They're not casual people coming to look. They're telling people. And if it's like you like a movie and you say to someone, you really got to see this movie, it's absolutely excellent, then think of the conversion rate. Think of what that person is. Then they're in the cinema, they're at the movies, and they're choosing their film, and they remember that someone they trust has recommended. And then people start actually remembering your shop name, coming back to you rather than coming back to eBay. So actually, a lot of this stuff, when you're thinking about conversion, is focusing on driving those kind of loyalty, driving the enthusiasm and that kind of stuff, because that's the thing that's gonna give you high converting, enthusiastic people who are going to get the sales for you in a way that other people can't. And I think that's where the focus kind of comes, is that it's way easier to move conversion by the way in which you describe and in picture and how your customer service works, and choosing the promotions which are more targeted rather than the ones which are broader. And I think that's probably I would say that's kind of the future. You don't want to get into a war with Fruit of the Loom. Well, it's not Fruit of the Loom itself. You want to be better than the other people selling the similar stuff than you do. You want people wanting to come back to you. Yeah, I have a system within my business where it's really easy to do. It's customers who haven't bought from me at all, which is like almost the entire world. Then the next stage is customers who bought from me once. Then it's customers who bought from me more than once. Then I run through the stages, and the big thing for me is when I know the name of their cat. They go on my CRM system, and if someone orders a cat toy and a signed for letter comes to their house in the name of their cat, they lose their minds. One the other day, which I did, I bought an expensive bottle of tequila a few years ago, and it came in a very fancy bottle. And I noticed that some people would just use bottles like that as a decanter. And so I listed it as a decanter, and it sold after a little while, and it sold on an offer. I listed it for like 25 quid. And, to me, that seemed ludicrous, because the actual bottle of tequila was probably only twice that, so I was charging a lot. Someone came along and said, "That's ridiculous. I'll offer you £15. And I went, "Yes, I'll take that." But I always start high. You've always got to start high. Yeah. And then as I was packing up, I thought, I think somewhere in my drinks cabinet, I've got a miniature, like 1 ounce bottle of Jose Cuervo. And I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I strapped a little note to the little bottle and said, "This is your starter set." And I taped it to the thing, and I sent it. And I got nothing. And it made me feel quite bad. And then bizarrely, like 5 weeks later, I just got this message out the blue in the middle of the night saying, "I only just opened it. This is brilliant. I've never seen anything like that." And sometimes when you're sending stuff on eBay, it's like you're sending a smile in a box. I was grinning as I put that package together, because I knew that it was going to surprise and delight someone when they actually opened it up. It's like it's something as some people put sweeties, they put candy. Yeah, so you order a thing and you open it up, and there's a little note and some sweets or something like that. And actually, again, you're sending a smile in a box. But then you've got a situation where, it wasn't much use to me because I'm not really a high volume seller on my consumer account, but I just got the best possible feedback. They said I was the best person ever. And again, it's that classic thing of, I don't drink as much as I used to anyway. So I don't see a situation in which I'm going to nail an ounce of tequila just like at home. So I gave away something which was of very little value to me. And as a result, there's going to be someone who's 50-50 about whether they're going to buy something off me, and they're going to look at that feedback, and they're going to see one astonishing piece of feedback in amongst there, and it's going to turn them into a customer. And so, actually, if you've got the opportunity to do those kind of things, then you should definitely give it a go.
Yeah, that's the difference between someone who looks at, let's say, shipping as just a part of it, something that they don't like doing, they do it begrudgingly, they get it done, versus someone who really looks forward to doing that and putting that extra touch into what they're selling. And you talk about newsletter. I've always thought that sending out a newsletter or something like that is most beneficial to someone that sells within a niche. You could probably get more out of your efforts when you're selling in a niche than if you're someone like me that sells everything, right? Because someone buys it. I'm known for selling toilet seats, but if someone buys my toilet seat, their problems is solved in that area. Sending out a newsletter, saying, "Hey, we have more toilet seats," is probably going to fall on deaf ears. So what's your thoughts on that? And really, I don't want to get into newsletters, but I've always thought that it was a niche type of
Yeah,
activity.
I mean, if you're an everything seller, I mean, toilet seats is an interesting one. I don't know how you source so many toilet seats. So I don't know where you're going at the weekends. Do you just go around bars like the next morning? They go.
We have a plethora.
I'm not even going to ask that question. And I presume there are no such things as Scooby-Doo toilet seats. So what I'd say is, like, interestingly, if you do have some things you sell, you can obviously segment buyer groups by category. So like if you sell books and toilet seats, you can split up your audience of toilet seat people and book people. Although books and toilet seats, that kind of goes together, I think. You've bought your toilet seat, do you want a novel? Or something like that. That's probably saying a little bit more about me than it is about in general. I think, I think it makes a slightly different point. And one of the points I kind of make about people who are flippers and resellers is eBay's such a big thing and it's such a big market that considering specialization is an interesting thing to do, because the more you specialize, the more you can know more and maximize your pricing. You can have a customer base that you can go against. So, if I were you, I would say, keep selling everything, but think about the toilet seat business as a kind of distinct entity. Can I get some more of that? Can I get some rare? Can I, as we always say, you get a big one, get a Japanese one, get a vintage one, get a bright red one, and start becoming that toilet seat guy. And then you will know. I mean, I'm guessing that right now you can look at any toilet seat and know how much you should be selling it for, because you sold loads of toilet seats.
It was a purchase I made. I made about 50 or 60 of these safety toilet seats. So like if you have to have a surgery, you can have a toilet at your bedside, or you can move it to your bathroom. Their accessibility. Yeah. And really, it was just one of those things where I got a good price on them, and they're selling a lot slower than I anticipated. So it's not a product that I'm going to be looking at getting more of. But I think that's the biggest challenge, though, if you are going to, really get into, like, for instance, your cat toys. You have a source where whether you make them yourself or you have someone making them for you, or you go through wholesale, you can continually go back and get more as you need it. For me, a lot of these things, if toilet seats were hot, I'm not finding a whole lot of them right now. You know what I mean? So it's that's always the biggest challenge in my mind, to niche down, is just the sourcing part of it. Having a reliable source where you can continue on demand, keep bringing that in.
This is the thing. It's like, this is now it's kind of business strategy, is that some people, like, one of the traditional things that people have done with eBay, because you can start doing it with no money, is the classic story is, like, first of all, I start selling the things that I actually own. I clean out my closet. Your great aunt drops down dead and suddenly you're selling a load of pottery figures or something like that. I don't know. And then, because you generated a bit of money, then you start going to, in the UK, you have things like car boot sales where people will just drive up in their cars. And then you go to the thrift shops or charity shops in the UK. And then the question is, do you continue doing that? What some people do is then they go out and try and, like, sort. They're thinking, is there somewhere that I can get to that other people can't get to in order to source stuff? So you go to your local. We're now going to talk about toilet seats for the next half hour. It's the Scooby-Doo of the second half of the show. Maybe there's a couple of, like, assisted living places down the road, and you say, well, what are you doing with your slightly older toilet seats and so on? Like, you kind of find a supply, is the whole thing. And then or you could say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast my net wider, but I'm looking at mobility and assisted living. So if I see anything else and then you're sitting there and you're thinking, I'll also, I'll get I'll get a few Jack Jones records and stuff like that, because if they need the help getting down the toilet, they probably like that kind of music and stuff. That's the other top tip. Obviously, thinking of Jack Jones, is if you're a seller of this stuff, keep an eye on the obituaries, because if you're sat there with a load of Jack Jones LPs, those are worth 25%, 50% more in the period of about 5 or 6 days after he died. So sometimes you can accidentally sell all of your inventory and go, I wonder why that was, and then you look at the internet and you find that person died, and so therefore, or did something really bad. It's if they're in the news.
He died a week ago, right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. I'm a big fan of The Love Boat. It's a strange thing. It wasn't really widely shown in the UK, but I have watched it all the way through once, and I'm now on the second watch through of the whole thing. I'm a big fan, and obviously of the music of Jack Jones. But yeah, it's so that's one of the things you can do, because like what that brings onto is like you've got conversion there. And what you're trying to do is, what can I do? What are the small changes I can make to make someone who wasn't going to buy my stuff? What are the things I can do to put my items in front of people who are more likely to buy them? And so on. So like you're just trying to drive efficiency in what you do. But then that leads into some other things which I think are really important for sellers like you, which is like trying to change, like moving on the topic a little bit. I was thinking about this, is that actually when you're talking about what you can do and you're thinking about what can I actually change, again, in the face of some big eBay calculation of which I do not know, in the case of like a world in which my traffic can go away a bit for a while, or something can happen, and eBay doesn't care so much because I may be losing and someone else is winning, but the overall number is going up or something like that. So then you say, like, there are still things I can do even in that market. And they are things like, can I get more money for the same thing? Can I work on my processes to make them more efficient and stuff? So, going into the heart of this reseller side of things, it's things like, can I list items more quickly? And are there any tips so that I can list 20 items in a day instead of 15? Are there ways in which I can carve out time to do that fancy stuff because my pick and pack is taking me a little less time? Are there efficiencies in the way that I'm taking my images and so on? And a really big thing is the more images you take, the less words you have to use. And so, having a system where you can quickly take a really load of photographs, having like a SKU storage system and proper organization of your goods so that you can find things quickly and things don't get lost. There's stuff like, changing my returns policy and the way I deal with customers, because actually I'd rather save my time than save my money, because my time is more valuable than that. So there's all sorts of things there. I mean, I'm literally just about to do a big video on images and photography. And I mean, so you sell a lot of stuff. What's your photo setup? How does that work?
Well, I have it out in the garage where I keep all of my listed stuff there. But as I bring stuff in, it comes through the garage and go through it. I have a system in place because I deal with a lot of large items. So I take the item, I evaluate it, make sure it works. If it does work, clean it up, get it up on I have 3 tables that I have set up. Comprised of my listing area, got the lighting and everything. And I'll just go on and take my photos. And once that's done, I'll bring it down and I'll go on to the next item.
So do you do all your photography in one go separately from the listing, or do you take the photos, then go and do the listing, then go and take the photos? And
I'll do a batch. I'll do them in a batch. So I'll do that process. So I have the item, unpack it, test it, clean it, photo, next one. And I'll do that for 5 to 10 items, and then I'll list those items.
Because there are some people who don't take that kind of assembly line approach, for instance. So actually sharing this stuff, this is the good stuff that people should all be talking to about this. Like there are some people, for instance, who don't reserve a space. So they have to like clear an area to do their photography, but then it's a mess and stuff. And they say it's because I'm like limited in space or something like that. There are some people who they take their photos and then they use online tools to clean them up. Whereas actually, if they got their background and lighting correct, then they can take 20 pictures in less than 20 seconds. And they don't have to spend then 30 seconds per photo tidying them up. The one that I don't get, like what I'll do is I'll think of a SKU, a stock keeping unit for an item. So if I'm doing a batch, if I'm like, it's very rare that this happens for me now, but if I'm listing like 20 items in a day, then like something is, you think of all the times when you've been listing an item and you've made a little mistake, and actually that little mistake throws you and it just puts you off your rhythm and it wastes a load of time. So whenever I get a listing, the first thing I do is when I think to myself, I'm going to sell this thing, I assign it a SKU, like a code. And actually, if you're doing it properly, it's related to where it's stored as well as so you have your shelves numbered. And so you know it's like A27 means it's in the box number 27 on shelf A, and then you give it a number afterwards. You do that, and I put that on a small piece of paper or a sticker, and a bit like the old-fashioned clapper boards that they had at the thing. The one thing I do is I take all my photos in one go, but I make sure I take a photo of the SKU card and then all of the items, because that way I take it on a phone. But then you've got your list of files and there's no mixing up which photos are due, because they're all in sequence, but then there's a marker in between. And if you're taking photos of lots of similar stuff, sometimes you get into a muddle and you get your photos in the wrong order. And then suddenly, because they're out of order, you lose your thread and you waste like 30 minutes trying to work out, or you have to go back and take some more photos. Or when you're uploading them, it's inconvenient to upload them because you can't select them all at the same time when they're laid out on the files. Those kind of things, like that's really useful for people in the community to share their best practice. There are people who are not using light boxes. And then there's some fun stuff, like people spend money on things like turntables. And I mean, that's a really useful thing, because if you can keep your camera fixed and move the item, that's so much easier to take.
Like a Lazy Susan.
Yeah, and that's it. And some people, so if you go onto eBay and you search for photographic turntable, you will pay twice as much as if you search for a Lazy Susan. But actually, if you search for Lazy Susan, you will pay twice as much as if you search for, I can't remember the term. It's a something bearing, but you can literally just get the metal bit that does the Lazy Susaning, and you can just screw a board to it. If you literally have a screwdriver and a plank, you can make your own turntable, and you can buy a Lazy Susan bearing for like $4. Whereas there are some people paying like $49 for.
Oh, I paid $9 on Amazon for this little Lazy Susan. I've used it a few times for larger items. It makes it easier to turn it at different angles and stuff.
Stuff like, when you first start, take your photos in the bathtub. It's got a good curve back to it. Not if you have like an avocado colored bathtub or a hot tub, but if you have an absolutely standard white bathtub, then the curve on the back of it means you're going to get minimal shadow. Tends to be a clean white background. So like, before you had the bath rather than afterwards, and not when anyone in there.
Not while you're in the bath, right?
Yeah, and don't take photographs of stainless steel items when you're not wearing pants. I
can see if you sell rubber duckies, you can maybe take the photos while you're in the bath with
this
them, right?
is it. Well, you need a lifestyle shot as it goes. But then there's all sorts of tiny tips, like the cat toy that I sell is made from paper, so it's floppy. Sorry, I don't know how to put it in front of it. It's floppy like this. And the bags that I sell it in are floppy like this. Pain in the ass. Sorry, pain in the ass. American view. And I was mooning around, and I put a flyer in with my stuff to encourage people to buy more. I put a coupon in so they'd come back and buy again. And I used to buy the cheapest flyers I could, but now my flyers are, I won't get it in front of it. These are a bit more cardboard, and I use them as a shoehorn. So they cost me 1 penny more to be this kind of more rigid material. But as a result, I can put the floppy thin in like that. And it means I don't make mistakes when I'm packing. And that means I can pack 60 of them in an hour, as opposed to the old days where sometimes it'd be like threading a needle. You know, it's like this. And it's like tiny little things like that. I used to have behind me, when I was selling them a lot more, sadly, a lot of my stuff goes through third-party fulfillment houses now and things like that. But when I used to pack a lot, I used to have what you'd call a Dr. Octopus setup. So I had shelves behind me like this, and there were those IKEA cube shelves. And I had it so that the more popular stuff was surrounded, so I could go like this, and the less popular stuff was like this. But as a result, I was like that, and I could get everything done. Because again, it's that classic thing is, what happens when you sell twice as many as you thought you were going to do? How quickly can you do it? But more importantly, with your time being valuable, if you can make it so that your pick and pack and dispatch takes half as long as it used to, because you've brought in, you know, a few cents worth of changes to how you do things. You've invested a little bit more in convenient shelving. You've thought about your packaging and you have it properly laid out and those kind of things. Then suddenly you've got the time to start, you know, sending pictures of getting cat pictures off your customers and like talking to them about how Tiddles is doing, you know, today, or thinking about, like, I can spend half an hour thinking about segmenting my newsletters a little bit more. So I think, you know, this kind of stuff is also really valuable. But I think also the other really crucial one is in the pricing. And I think a lot of resellers kind of leave money on the table. I don't know whether you feel. I mean,
well, I think people tend to overprice their items. You know, they get too fixated on the highest comp that they find on the eBay solds, and they're convinced that they're going to get that too. And they even though the market may have changed, they're not going to budge. They're going to hold out for their price.
I think with me, and I mean, I don't know, this is one where chat should pitch in and stuff as well. But the way I look at it is it comes from the days of auction and why I don't like auction. It's the classic, you don't get the best price, you get the second best price. You get $1 more than what the person who didn't want it very much was prepared to pay. Yeah. But it's that classic, the person who's prepared to pay you the most might end up paying you the least. And how do you just milk a few extra dollars? I think it's about being realistic at price, but it is about starting high and moving downwards and being patient in the way you do it. And I literally have an example. When I was doing a video about some pricing, I went back and looked at some comics, and I own a load of comics from a series called American Vampire, and I have all 8 books. And I found out, to my sad shame, about a week ago, that in fact there are 9 books. They did another one, and I wasn't aware of it. Yeah, someone said, "Am I in the UK?" Yes, I am in the UK. And so I went onto eBay and I looked, and American Vampire 9 goes for about 50. I'm pointing at all the other 8 American Vampires I have on my shelf, but it goes for about £15. But I wasn't in that much of a rush, and I noticed that someone was auctioning it for £9 plus £3 postage, and I thought, well, I can't lose anything here. I'll just put in a £9 bid, and if no one else bids on it, all right, I'll wait 6 days, but then I get what I want, and it's £2-3 cheaper. And because I'm a motivated buyer, and had a little look, and I just think I feel sorry for all the ones who were listing it at a proper price, because there was some idiot who pushed it out there so that someone could get it cheaper on the auctions. And the thing is, like, you're never going to get an awful lot of money from that auction, because the moment the auction goes to £15, I'll stop bidding. I'll just do a buy it now instead. So, like, the methodology where, and it's really easy to do in eBay now because of the way that you can bulk amend listings, is you get yourself a little system and you start your price high, and then you wait a bit, and obviously you always enable offers and stuff so that people can come and make you an offer anyway. And you can always choose when to get rid of an item. And then you come to a certain period and you say, okay, it's Sunday now, and that's my day for price changes. But what you do is, before you drop the price, say 10%, you send out an offer, just a 5% to everybody who's watching it then, and then they might buy. And if they don't, then you drop the price by 10%, and you keep going through the process, and you just drift it downwards that way.
Yeah, we do that.
That means that at worst, you are making someone like me wait and sweat. I might break. I might say, this is coming down in price, but someone else might buy it. And unlike an auction, there's no get backsies on that. As a buyer, you're creating more pressure on me. And that's the whole thing. I was prepared to pay £15. I would have been happy with £15. I ended up paying 12. And I don't think it's a terrible scandal for you to attempt to make me sweat if I want to do that. And the downwards auction means that I can't afford to risk it. I can't. With an auction, I can make my decision in 6 days' time, 1 minute before that auction ends, as to whether I'm going to fold or not. Whereas with the downward price, fixed price one, I'm always under pressure, because at any moment someone can come in and just take that item, and then I'm going to feel really bad, because if someone buys it for £13 and I could have got it earlier, it's like, I think that I think is a thing, and it's fiddlier to do. But if you kind of industrialize it, you list your stuff on a day, and then you check 7 days later, and then you uniformly change the prices on that. And it's literally the way that Seller Hub is set up now. When you do the bulk edit function, it's just like an Excel spreadsheet almost. You just sat there with a line of prices, and you can just amend that way. And I think it's a good system.
Well, we are about, I'd say, halfway through the normal. We usually go about 2 hours in this program. But what I'd like to do, and I have some questions that I've taken from the Profit Playbook podcast, where viewers have left some questions. But I'd like to at least acknowledge some of the folks that are here with us. I usually do that throughout the show, and then answer questions as they go. But you remember Bearded Picker? He hit the thumbs up, has 2 sales already. That was before the show started. And what we do is we tell the audience, if you hit the thumbs up, before or after the live, you're going to get a sale within the next 24 hours. Just put that positive karma out there. And if you fail to get a sale in the next 24 hours, I'll give you every cent back that it took you to hit that like button. It's a guarantee. We got Andy Reno here. Of course, you remember Josh Galt. He was with us on the podcast. We got Keith Pitko. Hello, John and Jen and the family. He's from the UK. We have Glenda Bavona. We also have Glenda Rundle Van Diest. Sorry. Jackie Bleckner, flipping from the trailer. Vicky's with us. Brenda Smith. And I'm just going to go just to acknowledge who we have here, because I'm not going to really go into all the comments, but I just want to make sure that you guys know that we acknowledge you. Duncan, he is from from Australia. You guys have changed your clocks. This show starts an hour later. I'm going to have to pop out of and mail my sales. So it's tomorrow morning for him. We got Larry Todd in Texas. Joe Samard is with us. Mr. Sadie, Larry, Semperfi, Henri Squaw, Ping G. Nice to see you guys. Soda City Flip, Shane. Jake, Scander Freedom's with us. We got Bill and Midge. Good morning, FAE fam. We got Spam Banshee. I'm hopeful that you guys, Primo is here. Okay, I was looking for your show this morning. I didn't see it, so I was kind of worried about you guys. We have JRKR. We got Gowanus. Thanks for being here. Restoring sanity after that PPP debacle this past weekend. I don't know if it was a debacle. It was a pretty good show. I mean, of course, it's hard to follow the show that we had with Bert, but it was pretty good. Dig Vintage, evening, everyone. DM Ephemera, nice to see you. We have Jerry Johnson.
Did you say hi to Jovial?
Jovial, yeah, Jovial Juggler.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice to see you, Jovial. We got Biff Boffo. Bert has vindicated long tail resellers. Some of my items take years to sell, but I convert at 4%, top 20 in my niche. I have 40,000 items and I only get 10,000 page views in a month. Rob Something, Bert is a voice of reason, something that has been missing in this space forever.
I'm not sure that's true. To both sides of that.
I hope to sell my inventory in 6 months. We'll put things on sale, etc., all until all is gone. I have Samantha Hunter's with us. Our buddy Roman, Roman Adventures. Mike Gertis is here. Good evening. So, what is considered to be a good conversion rate in eBay's eyes? I had a higher conversion rate last year, but my sales are up 45%, 1.95 to 1.8. You should think I'd be down in sales. So that's one of the questions. So might as well go to that while we're here. One of the questions that I have now, when we're talking conversion rates, we're talking, is there a difference between an item's conversion rate versus your store's conversion rate? And what is a good, or let's say, what is the base conversion rate in both cases? What's considered an average?
Oh, it varies wildly. So what I would say is if you are selling with depth of stock, so actually weirdly I'm looking at the Bearded Pickers store because like I've found it and
fine, wasn't it?
It turns out they're selling stuff that they have multiple quantity of. So if you have multiple quantity of an item, then eBay's got the data and it knows what your conversion rate is. And so item conversion rate is important. Obviously, if it's a unique item, they don't have the conversion data. What they'll know over time is how bad it is. If you sit there for 6 months on something, then they're going to know it's kind of poor. But they're probably looking at, therefore, you as a seller and your conversion rate as a whole. Now, to the point of, I had a higher conversion rate last year, but my sales are 45% up. It's because it's relative. It's you versus the people that you're selling against. So it may well be that you've gone from 1.95 to 1.8 and everybody else has gone lower than that. What you'll find is if that's your account level conversion rate, what you may find is that some of your stuff is still converting at 3-4% or more, and some of it's not selling and so converting at 0. So again, it's like averages, it's hard to work out. It's also almost impossible to know what the conversion rates of your competitors are because they'd have to tell you. There's no publicly available data on that. So all you can do is try and get better. So when you're looking at that 1.95 to 1.8, you're asking yourself the question, what's the pattern here? Is it that I have a load more items which just aren't converting, which are dragging down the average? Is it that some categories are still doing well and other ones are? So you kind of look into the detail there. But also you're sitting there thinking, what am I doing actively to change that? So your conversion rate only comes into play when people are already looking at your item page. So it's an item page issue. And so when you're looking at the item page, you're saying, therefore, it's not so much the primary image, it's your image stack. Is there anything there that could be added? People are probably looking a little bit more at your feedback and standards. So has that dropped away or anything like that? And bear in mind, it might be that other people in your category have got better. So have a look at who you're competing against. Go on to eBay Research, which used to be called Terapeak, and see who is selling lots for the keywords that you do. But then, look at the description, look at the item specifics and think, is there anything more I could be putting in there which would make people convert? And again, you're always thinking, is there something missing which people care about, which is a feature of my item, but I haven't explained as a benefit? So I was talking with someone today. I had a long day. I did an 8-hour round trip to do 5 hours work teaching an Amazon agency how to add eBay as another thing they work on. And we were talking about it, and they were selling like throws or rugs that you put over a sofa or a couch, And what one of their competitors had done is made a virtue of the fact that it was made from synthetic fibers by saying it was vegan. So it was a vegan rug. And actually you can buy gluten-free shampoo, and folks ain't drinking that stuff. But there will be some people kind of searching for that, and for them that's a feature. And if it's a feature of your product and you haven't called it out, then that 1 in 1,000 customer who will go, oh yeah, I'll have some of that. If it's a gluten-free rug, that's the rug for me. Kind of stuff. I always thought there was a massive industry in selling fat-free white wine. I mean, all white wine is fat-free unless you're putting butter in it, which it shouldn't be. But there's bound to be someone walking through Walmart who sees a bottle of fat-free white wine and says, I'm having some of that fat-free white wine. So, it's like, coffee. I know this because I worked a bit with a few companies that do this thing called structured data, which is all about providing all of the metadata for stuff. And you'll get things like coffee pods, and they'll put the calorific value of a coffee pod on it, despite the fact that there's no calories in coffee, because sometimes people are searching for low calorie coffee. Likewise, when you're selling a fashion item, there are some people who search for, items based on the number of buttons they have, and if you haven't put the number of buttons that you have, then you're not going to do that. So literally you're looking at this conversion rate and you're thinking, this is where do I put in those item specifics, which I thought were a bit crazy because they're massive long tail item specifics. Is this the bit where I add in a few extra stuff? It can be something as simple as emphasizing that you are like a family business. That might make someone, thinking of all the extra good things you can do, like going into that feedback and seeing if you can get someone to change their mind, or leaving a comment underneath the negative that makes you look more reasonable, and things like that. There's a lot of that. But I mean, certainly I think that working on your imagery generally is a decent thing to do.
But don't go and put fat-free in at the end of your listings, guys.
No, don't waste your keywords with something like that, but certainly drop it into the item specifics. Like item specifics, you can spam those. As long as they're accurate, you can have thousands. I mean, literally, like in most categories, they'll have an item specific which is for occasion. And so you're selling a hat. You can make it a birthday hat, an anniversary hat, a hat.
I've received an error message for having too many item specifics. I had to go and delete some before I can launch the listing.
I haven't seen that, but you must have had a lot of item specifics.
It wasn't in the thousands, though. It was like, for instance, I think I was putting different model numbers that a toner would work for. But going back to conversion rate, one thing that I was looking at it the other day. I think I was talking to I think either Beard or Archie, one of the two. But I was going through my items, the conversion rate, because I sell one-off items. It always shows at 0 until you sell it, right?
Yeah, and then you get a number for it.
So you really, you're looking at all your unsold items that have 0, because I sell one-offs.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to know until it's too late. Okay, well, I sold that's at a 20% conversion rate. Great. I may never see that item again.
I think that you could do, because you can pull an Excel spreadsheet. You can do a listings traffic report. So when you go to the traffic tab of performance, so you go performance, then traffic.
Right.
And you get all of your funnel metrics. So you get a graph that shows the impressions you've got. Then you get a graph that shows the page views. Then you get a graph that shows your sales. Underneath that, there's a list of items, like your top items. There's usually about 20 of them. And it gives you some more detailed stats on those, and it gives you conversion rate. There's a little download arrow there, and you can download your listing traffic report as an Excel spreadsheet. And what you could do is you could download that on a weekly basis. And you could set yourself a hard limit. You say, like, I'm going to be a bit more scientific about this. I'm not going to say it's a month. I'm going to say when my click-through rate drops below a certain amount, or when my conversion rate drops below a certain amount, that's the point at which I'm going to address something in the listing. Like, that's the point at which I take action. So you might say that, like, from what I know about items that sell, with the items that sell, the conversion rate is usually above 1% conversion rate when it actually goes. So usually that means that 100 page views and it's going to sell. So at which point what you do is you run that traffic report and you look at everything that's got 100 page views and hasn't sold, and you say to yourself, well, eBay is making a calculation and it's got to be guessing that my conversion rate is going to be less than 1%, because it can't be any higher than that now, even if someone comes next impression and buys it. And so then you could be a bit scientific and say, right, okay, I'm going to do something. And if you're being really lazy, you just relist it. And I used to think you had to do sell similar, because that's what someone told me about 12 years ago. But some clever person in my comments just said, no, you're dead wrong. Like, I go and have a look. And it was true. You can just relist and it changes your item number and so it resets you in search. But you could just relist. But obviously, if just relisting, you're not really solving your problems. You maybe get a boost and people will see it, but it's still the same listing. So that's the point at which you think, am I going to drop the price? If I look at the listing, does it need some more photographs? Like, do I want to do this? Now, patently, if it's something that's like $7 or something, I just drop the price a little bit and move on. But if you're talking about something that, like, it's got a bit of value to it, then you might want to revisit and just put a little bit of extra in there, change the keyword order around, try something a little bit different, and then give it a relist. Because again, it's that classic thing, is if it's already in your inventory, it's way less work to not have to go out and find something else. Like, if you could actually sell that one, it's a more efficient use of time. And I think someone in the comments just said something like, I aim to sell everything within 6 months. It's never really that. It's the only reason you have to put a time limit on when you're selling something is if you're not hitting the monthly revenue bottom amount that you need to hit, and your stock room is full. But if you've got space where you store your stuff, then you're fine until you get full. And I know certain businesses where, actually, because their business is almost more warehousing than it is retail, that they amend their prices based on how full the warehouse is. Like, not based on any demand or anything like that. They just sit there and they say, well, when we're 90% full, that's when we start discounting everything. But actually, when we're 50% full, we don't have to sell anything. And so therefore you do it. But also, you got to keep the lights on. So, if you said to yourself, I've got to sell $2,000 worth of stuff, then, maybe you have to cut your losses, get a bit of turnover, sell some things, and then, give yourself the funds to buy something else. Or source something else.
Well, here's the thing. I have some questions that I want to ask. If we can try to fit this in a 30-minute time span. But there are questions taken from the Profit Playbook podcast, and not necessarily related to conversion rate, but I thought they were still important to ask you. DNB LBS asked this question. Does the time of day you list or stay active on the site impact your sales?
You know kind of when the customers are going to be on site. So it's still the case that Sunday is a good day. That much is true. And so theoretically, again, if you list on a Sunday, there's going to be more customers there on a Sunday. So you've got a higher chance of lots of people seeing your item. Obviously, traditionally, people have kind of looked at stuff in the morning, at lunchtime, when they get home from work, that kind of period of time, that kind of stuff. But especially if you're not auctioning, your stuff is there whenever the customers are going to be there. Right. This is what some, like, I have a client that sells lawnmowers, and they say, should we not turn off our promoted listing for lawnmowers in December? Because you can't mow a lawn in December. And I say, why would someone be on eBay typing the word lawnmower into the search box if they didn't want to buy a lawnmower? So yeah, you're just paying, you want to be there when people are searching. Now, if you're using buy it now, then it doesn't matter what time you list it or when you're being active, because it's going to be there when the customers are. It's only when you're time limiting yourself with an auction that you have to be conscious of that. And that, you know, there used to be, weirdly, that whole power of when auctions ended used to be really, really big. So there used to be a phenomenon where when it was Sunday night in England, which was when all the old school sellers used to time their auctions to end, that they would do, it was so powerful effect in search that actually at that time, if you were in the US, you would see tons of UK listings popping up in search on the international. And so they deliberately put an artificial restriction on US to UK and UK to US visibility on auction items in those periods of time. And they actually introduced a new functionality. There's if you sell fashion and you do sell it internationally, you'll be aware that there's a tick box you can tick, which is like the international visibility button. And that was designed specifically because people then complained my item is going missing in the States, or if they were USA, vice versa. And you tick that and you paid like 15 cents or 15 pence extra, and they would make you visible a bit again under those conditions. But I think my suspicion is that the charge still exists, but the effect is no longer there. So I think people are still paying for that, but they probably don't need to anymore.
Box there before. Now, what is your perspective on listing daily versus listing, say, once or twice a week in batches?
I think that the efficiencies you get in listing in batches outweigh the effect of listing every day. I think if you could, you should list every day, because that way you've got new items in your store every day. You've got reasons for people to come back. And as I said, every new item is an item that could potentially be a really high converting item, whereas other items aren't. But I just think the efficiency of doing things in batches means that if you're listing every day, I reckon the whole process is going to take you like 50% longer to do, because you can't sit there for an hour and just take photographs of everything. You know, you have to, it's breaking up the process. You've got to think an assembly line is more effective than that. So, I mean, if you're terribly inefficient, then just list every day, you know, if you've got loads of time on your hands. But if you can say to yourself, because, you know, quite frankly, if you've got enough volume so you could be listing every day, what you might want to do is have Monday for photographs and Tuesday for titles and Thursday for, you know, so on. Do it that way so you can do each job together at the same time and gain efficiencies from doing it that way. But yeah, no, I generally doing things in batches, the efficiency outweighs the benefits of listing something every day.
So here's a question from River Bend Resell. We kind of touched on this, but maybe not to the satisfaction of answering their question. For unique item sellers, does the conversion rate of your account matter? So that's of your seller's account, or just the conversion rate of individual listings with multi-quantity?
I think that your account does matter. Like, I can't say that absolutely for sure, but like what I'm saying is effectively the algorithm is a numerical calculation. So it you know, that's what an algorithm is. So it has to assign values. So eBay has to guess what it thinks your conversion rate is going to be. Otherwise, there's a zero in the equation. And as we know, you know, when you multiply by zero, everything goes to zero. So they have to assign a value. And then you sit there and you think logically, well, in the absence of other data, what do they use? And like maybe they're trying to find other items like yours that other people have sold. But actually, if you're selling unique items, that's really tricky to do. So I think they probably do default to what's your conversion rate as a seller. And, you know, quite frankly, it's the classic thing of, even if it's not true and you're knocking your guts out to have a high conversion rate across your store, you're actually doing a good thing anyway. So it's never going to hurt you to want to have a high conversion rate across your store. So you should be doing it anyway. Is I think it's like one of those things. It's the whole thing of, we do not know whether, back in the the 70s or 80s, people would say we don't know if pollution is causing the world to heat up, but what we do know is you don't want to breathe in smoke either way, so you might as well get rid of the pollution. It's like, it's because it just makes the world more pleasant, even if it's not a massive thing. So likewise, like, there's no harm in increasing your whole account conversion if you can, because it's going to be good news for you, even if it's not having a massive effect in search.
Question from Nathaniel Marish, 4773. I'm not sure I got the last name right, but I tried. When using Sell Similar, how much do you need to change the listing for eBay to recognize it as a new listing?
The only way, there's a little bit of stuff that eBay can do to recognize that a product is similar to another one, and that's if it's in the eBay catalog. So if you're selling something that's in the eBay catalog, then you're always going to have, eBay's always going to have some historical information about that item, not necessarily your sales of that item. And there are a few ways you can tell whether the item you're selling is in the eBay catalog. If it's an item that has reviews on it, then it has to be in the eBay catalog. But it's hard to do this without screen sharing. But when you look at an item page, what can happen is you can see a bit within the item specifics, and it's like an eBay form thing. So it's the same information for every item that's listed that looks like that. There's that. But right at the top of the page, I'm trying to hard to describe it.
That's driven by the UPC code. You put the UPC in there and it auto-populates.
Some things with UPCs and EANs are still not in the eBay catalog. So not everything like that. So one of the ways you can tell whether something's in the eBay catalog is you'll all have to go away and look at this for yourself. But when you look at an item page, right at the top of the item page, really above all of the things, there's a tiny strip of text that goes across. And so it starts with the level 1 category. So it'll be like home and garden. And then it'll go kitchen. And then after kitchen, it'll be, cooking utensils. And then after that, it will be, spatulas or something like that. And you probably don't read it or notice it. Now, if that string of text ends with a generic term, as in if it ends with spatula, or it ends with cat toy, then you know your item isn't in the catalog, because actually the last category in that string of text is called the leaf category. It's the last one. And if that little bit of text is the same as the title of your item, then that means you're in the eBay catalog. Now I can show you a picture of it. Like if you're able to screen share and bring up an item, I can point to the bit that I'm talking about. But
so I think you would put it in the present.
Mm-hmm.
Can I present?
I think you can.
With great power comes great responsibility. Okay, I'll give it a try.
Okay.
So share screen.
It might ask you to approve it, but I'll do that.
And I'm going to share a window, and you're going to see how terribly disorganized my life is at this
I
stage.
think we're all in the same boat there.
Cool. So I'm not seeing it. Are you seeing it?
Oh, here it is.
Here it is.
There we go. So if I type in, sadly, I'm just going to type in. There you go. So if we look at this one, this should. So what you can see here is this, because this is not me listing it, this is someone in the States. What you see here is you can see home and garden, greeting cards, party supplies, gift wrapping supplies, tissue paper. So this is not in the catalog. Whereas, let's just look at me. This is me demonstrating my lack of skill on the internet, despite being a professional. Right. If we go onto the UK site where I list it, what you'll see here is it goes home and garden, pet supplies, cat supplies, toys, and then it says see more tissue paper grass mats. And if I click on that little link, it takes me to my product page, which shows me I'm in the eBay catalog. And you know, this is where we're getting really geeky. You know it's a product page because after ebay.co.uk or after ebay.com, there's the letter P and then my item number or my catalog number there. So it tells you it's in. That means I'm in the eBay catalog. And then therefore eBay kind of knows what the item is and it has a history. What you'll also get is you'll know that your item is in the catalog because when you get to the about this item thing, you'll have a section called about this product where actually what it has is it has this eBay product ID or an EPID. I bet that's a level of geekery that you haven't got to before, but I'll stop sharing.
Well, that's good information. Thanks for sharing that.
But then to go back to the original question, apart from that information, how can eBay possibly know that an item is the same as the other? Like almost all eBay search surrounds the eBay item number. That's what the search goes on. That's how come you can have 27 different items that are all the same, but they all have different numbers and they all have different search positions. So when you do a sell similar or a relist, all you have to be conscious of is that the eBay item number changes. And then like eBay thinks it's new. So you don't actually have to make changes to the listing. But I would advise you to do so because otherwise you're just like a wasp bouncing against the window. You know, the definition of madness is repeating the same mistake again and again with the hope of achieving a different result. So yeah, I would advise you to make changes, but you don't actually have to.
Here's a question from the chat. eBay Live, is it actually I know it's been in beta for a long time. Is this going to be a thing or not?
I don't know. I mean, they had I'm in the UK and they had the eBay open like a month ago. So they had
no eBay Live. It's like Whatnot. Have you heard of Whatnot?
No.
Well, it's live auctions. So
sorry, that I think they want to do it. And haven't they done some demos? I'm pretty sure they've run some, haven't they?
They have, but more like on a beta level. But as far as putting it out now, Pitco is from the UK, so wondering if this might be.
Yeah, I think all I know is from when they do these schemes is that they go through a process where they will test and then try and scale. So they'll do something. So when I was there, I tried to work out how to do pre-order of DVDs and stuff. That was one of my projects. It's really hard to do because it's such a different level of trust. If you think of how the whole eBay system works, the idea that you give your money to a seller like 90 days in advance, and then they have to be able to deliver on the release day. And you think, well, that's easy. But it's not. I assure you it's not, because the system is hardwired so that if you give someone your money and they don't give you the goods within a certain period of time, you can open a case and stuff. And so you like something like that, you sit there and you think, well, this is the simplest thing in the world. I can do pre-order. It was like, I think it wasn't the only thing I did, but it was like 18 months of my life. And it was like, oh, we can't do this. And this was just in the UK and just for DVDs. And what we did is we built this kind of slightly off-platform jury rig version of doing it just to see if we did it, would people really dig it and was it successful? And then you have to make it scalable, because not only do you have to do it, you then have to fit it in with the existing trust and safety structures that you have. So often what will happen is some flashy, I'm not flashy obviously, but what I mean is some business guy I don't code or anything like that. I didn't work in the trust and safety team. I think if anything, they thought I was untrustworthy and unsafe. But I would say, let's do pre-order. And then it would create, people in Dublin would be crying, because they knew what that would mean. So I think what you're seeing here is patently that live stuff is, we know what TikTok is doing. And, it's a phenomenon. This is how the young people shop. I don't know whether Amazon have rolled it out, but there was talk that Amazon were going to have a kind of social media feed on their app prior to the homepage. So they were going to do this kind of curated content and video stuff. So I think that generally in retail, everybody's trying to offer this as a thing. It's very labor intensive. It isn't necessarily compatible with everything that eBay does. Because you imagine someone's doing a live, if one person's doing a live, you can kind of supervise it. But, quite frankly, if you've got 1 million people doing lives all at the same time, you can't moderate speech in the same way as you can with typing. Like you'd get nudity, you'd get profanity. So, thumbs up. We're all in favor. No, but it's like you literally, it seems like a good idea, but then you think that of the practicalities of doing it at scale, and people forget, that these are extraordinarily large enterprises. Like it's very, 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 very large indeed. My guess would be is they're working on it, but how to execute it in a way that doesn't involve them having to put their hands, to manage it actively. And then, of course, once they're managing it actively, you think, well, they could do thousands of them, but thousands of them isn't enough. UK alone, there's a couple of 100,000 business sellers who probably want to do it. So that would be my thing. Hard to get the trust and safety aspect of it right. Hard to make sure that people aren't making dodgy claims. That hard to make it so that they're. How do you considering how tough they are on how you describe items on the platform?
Right, but what's also to stop the seller from saying, okay, we just sold one of these. If you want something like it, or I have others, you can send me a text to this phone number. Take it off.
Well, that's one of the reasons why you used to be able to put loads of HTML and videos into your item pages back in the day in the description, and they slowly stripped out all the methodology by which you'd put a video in. Just simply because you can't police video in the same way. And now they have this very sanitized box number 2, in the image stack. And you'll have noticed when you submit video, it takes a little bit of a while to do it. That's probably because a human being is having a looky-loo at it. Here's the thing.
Yeah. Well, here's another one. Biff Boffo says, you mean eBay doesn't sabotage sales in order to force people to try promoted listings? Can we put that nonsense to bed? And I think in addition to that, there's people who do feel like their items are being throttled because they don't use promoted or for whatever reason. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think it. I think actually what people are confusing for sabotage is just the maths of the whole thing. If you're selling something for $10 and you're selling it without promoted listings, then you are giving eBay $1.10 in final value fees. So that's their expected outcome when your item sells. If you load up 10% of promoted listings, to you, it's 10%. To eBay, that's 100%, because instead of them getting $1.10, they're getting $2.10. So it has a disproportionate effect on the amount of money that eBay earns from the item. And so therefore, what happens is if you accept that eBay is trying to make the most money off a page, then those items are going to go higher. And then you look at promoted listings priority, which used to be promoted listings advanced, and they're actually earning money off the clicks, even if it doesn't sell on that. So, it might get well, we know how many clicks things can get before they sell, but like it might get 3 or 4 clicks, which means they're taking, $1.20 in click revenue, and then it sells, and so the take rate is there. And so what you've got to sit there and think is, if I'm stuck there with just my 10%, then I'm competing against people who are paying 20%. They're going to be a bit naturally higher in search. Now, the flip side of this, I mean, I saw a seller today, and they were an Amazon seller by trade who just started with eBay randomly, knew nothing, and their Amazon is even madder. There's a massive expectation to advertise on Amazon, sponsored ads, for instance. And the thing was, these guys were used to paying the 15.5% referral fee on Amazon, and then having a 20% ACOS, 20% on ads. So they were used to an exit rate of 35%. And so they just went onto eBay and spent that amount. So they were using promoted listings priority, promoted listings general, and their exit rate was like 37%. I mean, you couldn't even imagine that as an exit rate. You wouldn't want that at all. But they had the margins. Their business is based on the way that Amazon works, and so they did that. The first thing I did, and when I looked at it, is said, you just got to stop this now. You're like, what we're going to do is we're going to start with nothing and we're going to build things up. And so they switched everything off, and their impressions went down, their page views went down. The one thing that didn't go down was their sales. And they are literally doing the same amount of business as they were when they were advertising, but they're paying 11% for it now, not 30. Now, the reason for that was the phenomenon of, again, how the search engine works is most of their business is coming from real hero items that do really well in search. So when they turned off their promoted listings, they found that they were actually in 5th place most times. And as we know, 5th place, I hope you know, 5th place is first organic result. So you get 4 sponsored results. 5th is number 1. So in all honesty, when I'm shopping, because I know about eBay, I look at number 5. I don't look at number 1, because I know 1 to 4 is pay to play. Those might not be great items because someone might have lobbed a load of money on those. So I myself am a cynical tinfoil hat, old school. So I look at first organic for me, position 5. But again, a difference between Amazon and eBay. On Amazon, when you advertise, you get your organic result and you get your sponsored result on the same page. So if I put ads on my cat toys on Amazon, I can have position 4 and I can have position 6, for instance. On eBay, the same item can't appear twice on the same page. There's some exceptions. There's a little carousel.
Well, actually, when you sort it by price, you have your organic that appears above your sponsored.
Yeah. So and that's because, once you start not doing best match, you're not using the algorithm anymore.
Yeah.
So, but don't get fooled by that. You may think that everybody searches by price. It's like, it's a very, very small amount.
There's some people convinced that.
The fact that some people do it is the way that you can help improve your search position, because those are the people who buy your stuff that's down the page if you make it cheap enough. And so when you start with an item that you have depth of stock, you start it cheaply, and no normal person is buying it, but the 10% or less that search by price, they are buying it. And then you get that conversion from them, and slowly you inch your way up. But the big thing with these guys is what was happening is promoted. You can be in a situation where, and there are always circumstances in which it's worth using all of these products. I'm not knocking promoted listings. I actually launched promoted listings in the UK when I was an ad director, and I'm good buddies with the promoted listings people. So self-interest in here. I am friendly with these people. I don't want them to have a bad time, but also I believe in the product, and it definitely does a job. But you can have a situation where you're in a category and there are a few people, say the Fruit of the Loom guys, who, because they have margin on their product, because they buy 10,000 of the things that work, they've actually got 20% to spend. They don't mind a 30% cost of sale. So they'll all buy promoted listings priority, and promoted listings priority gets first dibs on the first 4 placements. So actually those first 4 placements, they're gone. That's pay per play. They're all there. And, they live and die because their products aren't as good. They don't convert as well. Who knows? But people look at them and they bounce out and so on. And they're really paying for their sales. But what that means is if you then put money into promoted listings general, then potentially what could happen is your purchase of promoted listings general gets you into slot 16 to 19 or whatever, the bit lower down the page. And because you've got that, you don't have an organic listing on that page, but you would have been number 5. So in this case, what happened with these guys is because they were doing well in organic search, when they turned off their promoted listings, all of their organic first page placements came back. So they were in position 5, position 6, position 7. So there wasn't a massive drop away in terms of the quality of the impressions that were going out with those guys. And they weren't paying for it anymore. But we're looking at now phase 2 with those guys. And what we're saying is now we need to take a segmented approach, because actually in the 200 or so listings that these guys have at the moment, there are actually still 100 or so of them that aren't ranking well yet because they're relatively new in search. And so actually we might want to spend some money on those just to put them in front of people in order to buy. So it's always nuanced. And likewise, promoted listings priority. I have a trick where you can run a report on a promoted listings priority campaign called the search query report. And you can actually even run this on a smart campaign. So even if you haven't picked keywords, you can run a search query report on the campaign, and it will tell you where your clicks and your sales are coming from. And if you get that Excel spreadsheet report, I've never yet seen a promoted listings priority campaign that couldn't have been profitable were it not smaller. Like, what happens is you're selling a sofa or a couch. Generally, the search term couch won't work very well for you. It's a high-level search term, but there's always a few specific low-level search terms that will work well for you. So with promoted listings priority, if you find the right product and you find the right keywords for it, then you can make that work for you. And it's part of the mix. And likewise, with promoted listings general, I wouldn't necessarily completely switch it off, but certainly I'd start with 2% and I'd work my way upwards and look at the numbers to see what's doing it. And it's really important when you're doing that to have a look at on a per item level, because different items work differently under promoted listings, even with the same percentage, because of their inherent quality score or non-quality score. In some cases, you're kind of spending money that you don't need to spend because you would have got the sale anyway. And in some cases, you're spending money which is genuinely incremental. And that's where like test and learn comes in, and pulling those reports and looking at it. And, it's time consuming, but, if you're spending money on it, it's quite important.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we're going to do one more question before we wrap up here. And it's one that I think is pretty important that has come up in a lot of our conversations. And Duncan has a similar question. When your sales are usually on fire, do sales crash for a few days and pick up again? Essentially, when you're selling, well, he sells collectibles and ephemera with large following. Now, what I see, and I've seen last year, I've had 3 $1,000 sales days. 2 of those days followed with 0 sales, and the other one followed like a really subpar sales day. And I know the conversation I've had with Josh Galt is like his thought is that eBay won't allow you to grow more than 60% year over year. Now, do you see any? Did you see anything when you worked at eBay, and do you see anything now where that's kind of in play?
Right. So there's a few things to unpack here. So in terms of eBay deliberately throttling people, they only do that for standards reasons. So it's a slightly difficult area because what you never say, even if you've left eBay many, many years ago, is you don't talk about exact tolerances, because you don't want people to game the system. So eBay deliberately don't tell you everything, because then the baddies know it and they will work against it and stuff. So there are certain triggers that sellers can do which bring them to the attention of eBay. It's called explosive growth. But eBay does that more in a concerned fashion. So if someone starts unexpectedly selling way more than they have previously sold, then what happens is the BDI of eBay, be it an agent or like some kind of algorithm or automated thing, will take a look. Now, the reason for that, very sadly, is that predominantly the reason why an account explodes in terms of sales is actually because of some kind of bad action. And this is the classic, normal account gets hijacked. Suddenly it's got 20 iPods or something like that, selling a bit suspiciously cheap and stuff. So what will happen is you will come to the attention of eBay if you have what is explosive growth. And that is because primarily explosive growth, there's a lot of fraud involved in that. Like it's because like generally with the way the algorithm builds and everything is things tend to happen a bit gently on eBay. And so when suddenly someone goes from nothing to lots, but actually what will happen is someone might just, you might get a little email saying, look, you might have to prove that you actually own those goods. So, provide us you may have had some invoice queries. Usually
I had that in 2019, actually.
Yeah. So that's the one thing. And that is really good, because if there was a system in which like anyone could come along and just suddenly list a load of nutty stuff and basically mess up loads of transactions, that would ruin trust in the platform. So that's important. The second thing that will happen is if you grow, you will show signs of stress if you're not able to cope with that. And so what eBay is also going to be looking at is changes over a short period of time in your service metrics and seller standards. So they'll be looking at things like cancelled out stock, cases closed without seller resolution, late delivery rate, clumps of bad feedback. Because again, eBay has a responsibility, which means that sometimes when people you can imagine if there's 5 bad transactions on a day, that could just be a blip in a good seller, or it could be the beginning of a monumentally large amount of bad transactions, a warehouse burnt down or something like that. But if you are growing steadily and honestly, and you can actually do explosive growth, and they'll check, and if you're legit, it's absolutely fine, and you're not messing up on any of your standards, then absolutely eBay will not be throttling your business at all. Like, it would be madness to do so. We love it. Well, we loved it. I loved it back in those days when people were growing. And you can, if you really dig, you can find loads of stories about people who started on eBay and within a year they're doing tons. And you think,
Right.
Well, how did that happen? You look at some of the sellers who are now doing tens of millions. Well, how did they get to that? Like, if eBay is cutting people off, then can you explain the existence of the big sellers? So absolutely not. And it would be financially suicidal to not allow people to grow. So then you ask yourself, why are these patterns happening? And the kind of honest answer to this, and I was thinking about this and trying to find like a non-pejorative, non-insulting way of doing this, is it's large number theory. eBay is way, way bigger than you would imagine it is. Even if you're pretty big, even if you're one of the biggest sellers on eBay, you're still a tiny fraction of all the activity. So your sales may go up and down really dramatically, but you're like fleas jumping up and down on the back of a dog. There's so many transactions that what we're talking about here is what would be a normal standard deviation for a tiny, tiny thing in a massive system. And so you may be varying by like $2,000 a day, but actually, because you've seen, you see the quarterly earning results, it's billions and billions of dollars. Right. So actually, like a movement in sales, which is particularly significant to you, isn't actually significant when you consider how big eBay is as a whole. So you're sitting there going, I did 0 here, and I did 2,000 the next week. That's just random volatility that happens when you're dealing with quite small numbers. Because again, you're thinking about human beings. If you think what needs to happen for you to make a sale, if you have a 2% click-through rate and a 2% conversion rate, then the 2% conversion rate means that 50 people have to look at your page before they buy something. But if you've got a 2% click-through rate, that means that 2,500 people have to see. So many people have to see your item in order for it to actually sell. And in that context, it's not unusual that it doesn't sell. Or, all it takes is one random person and suddenly it does sell. So it's not big. I think like the people who I've seen some clients that do, like 25,000 a day, dollars or pounds or whatever. Now, in that case, if they had a zero, that would be a significant thing, because they're selling many hundreds and thousands of items and they're selling it for many thousands of dollars. But the reality is given the size of the system at eBay, you should expect those ups and downs anyway. But no, eBay would, and eBay is really open and honest about when it does throttle you. You see it. That's the 6% surcharge is not to make money off you. It's effectively to hobble you. They don't want you being able to do a lot of volume if you're a bad seller.
Right.
It's as simple as that. And they're open. And, then you ask yourself the question is, why would a business that openly is absolutely very happy to tell you they're restricting your sales going to be secretive about the other thing? It's just, it doesn't make sense. They like money too much.
Well, what happens? I mean, because and I'll close with this. It's the what I look at as non-transparency. eBay, they do a lot of things behind the scenes. They don't really communicate very well with the sellers on the platform. And I think it leads people to draw their own conclusions as to what's going on.
Literally, I can kind of answer that, because you can't run the platform if you give out all the information, because for one, you build an algorithm and you set up rules and you have intended consequences, and sometimes it might not work out that way. But literally, they have to get on with the work, and you would never get anything done, is the whole thing. So you kind of finish on the whole thing is that it would be nice for everybody to know everything, but bad people would know that as well as good people. Right. And bad people who know everything are more likely to exploit in a bad way. Like the downside of everybody knowing exactly how everything works is far greater than things. And the big thing, remembering the fundamentals are still there. Like I know them. They are not twirly moustache villains. They are not intrinsically bad people. They are a publicly listed company that is reporting the high level numbers on anything. They have a duty to try and deliver value to shareholders, which is primarily driving revenue. But their business model means that they cannot drive revenue unless sellers are selling. Now, they tread a balance between making sure they sell more stuff, but trying to make more money off people. But ultimately, that really cheesy phrase, they only win when you win, that's there. That logic is unbreakable. There's not a situation in which they destroy the seller base or deliberately attempt to reduce sales. There's no logical reason for that at all. So, I absolutely appreciate the frustration and everything, but ultimately we're here because we're really into the detail of things. But quite frankly, if you put your smile on your face and just follow the instructions and do the right thing, you'll probably be okay. And you wouldn't have to stay up listening to a podcast for 2 hours on midnight on a Monday. But all I can say is I was one of them. I was one of them for a long period of time. And I know a load of them. And that stuff is absolutely true. And, it is still a very good place to be on. It's still a very big marketplace. And they are doing their best. And right now, I think eBay are trying to do more like all this AI stuff, all the making categories free. How many years have you been sitting there saying, like, look at what all the other platforms are doing? I've put I'm backing the horse that is eBay. This is my life. I wish they'd do something. Why don't we have a Bezos? Why aren't we making bold decisions? And I think people do think about eBay that way. And actually what's happening right now is they're saying, we're going to try some things which are designed to, like, we're fine. We're doing something. We're not doing things by the inch anymore. We're doing it by the yard. Well, that's not very dramatic, the many yards, the mile. And it's a really good time, I think, to be sat there on eBay, and it all comes from a really good place. So, like, yeah, it's frustrating because it's a bit like sometimes your parents are saying, because I said so, which is always really frustrating. But both, maybe you don't even trust the stuff about the good nature of the people who work there, but you just look at the logic. Like, the system only works if it works for sellers and buyers. And so therefore they would be mad to do things that hurt sellers and buyers. So even if they are in fact twirly moustache villains, they're your twirly moustache villains who only make money if you also win. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Well, not worried, but I am thankful that you decided to come and hang out with us for a couple hours here on the live, and I'm certainly looking forward to have you on we're going to have a rebuttal episode, or maybe add to the conversation that we had, because you know what? I've spoken to you now, been in a conversation now a good 3.5 hours with you between the PPP and this show, and I still feel like there's so much more to talk about. And hopefully you'll be able to make time for the PPP and maybe get to those questions. But I want you to let everyone know, if you want them to know, where can they find you on YouTube, and go and subscribe to your channel.
Well, the channel is called eBert Tips and Tricks. What I deliberately tried to keep everything lo-fi. So you will see my videos because all of the thumbnails are just an entirely black screen with just white text on them. So you'll be able to notice my videos. And also you won't get to see this face because I don't appear on my own videos. And a lot of the titles have like ex-eBay director talks about this. Quite a few of them are just practical things. So my biggest video is just about getting your titles in the right order and things like that. I'm gonna do another couple of videos, and then work is getting really busy because obviously it's peak season. So I'll probably go a little bit quiet. I'll do the PPP podcast, obviously, but then I'll probably go a bit quiet. And basically, if I'm active in doing videos and podcasts, it means that my general working life is not going well. So hope, fingers crossed, you won't see much of me until January. But as I said, I'll do the podcast and
Sure.
And yeah, then in the new year we can all think about what happened at Christmas.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that there you have it. Ebert, it goes by Ebert. His name is Robert, but hopefully that answers your questions a little bit about what we think, and what I've been convinced of is probably one of the most important things that you can focus on, and that is conversion rate. Once they're in your listing, how do you capture that sale? And there's so many ways you can approach different ideas to make that work. But figuring that out is yet another example of how flipping ain't easy. I want you guys to have an excellent rest of your week, and we will talk to you guys here very, very soon. Take care.